do, then I can just pretend like that was all part of the zombification process and I'm not a lazy idiot, but instead I'm a forward-thinking artiste. Otherwise, once I've got the basic body built, I can pop this placeholder head off and bring in a smaller ball of Super Sculpey so I can begin to super sculpt a skull. I figured rather than try and sculpt a gorilla head first then cut away sections to sculpt the skull beneath, it'd probably be easier just to sculpt the skull first and slap on the rest of the head as needed. However, I quickly realized I was deforming my skull as I sculpted, so I chopped the back off and pressed it onto a little wooden block, which will give me something solid to hold while I add the little necessary skull-appropriate details. Otherwise, with a mostly monkey-like skull coming together, I can press some big old monkey teeth into the gum-free gum line and then bake the whole thing so I can pop it off the block. I also made a separate bottom jaw at the same time that I'll super glue into place, then I can start taking some cosplay and smooshing that onto the hardened skull to thicken up the rest of the head and give me something solid to stick onto my monkey body. I'll blend the body into the skull and add some lumpy rolls at the back of the neck to help hold it all in place, then I can start refining the shape of the face, fitting a couple eyeballs in place, then poking and prodding and stabbing and jabbing the head until I've got a kinda horrifying monkey amalgam, at which point I can get back to the body and start refining the final shape. I'll add some cuts and folds to the obliques to help give a sense of movement where the monkey's torso is twisting, then I'll tilt the head upwards and add various neck muscles and appropriate bulges before moving down to the bottom half to add that last layer of ape-like musculature to his tree trunk legs. To fit the arms in place, I'll poke some big divots into the monkey's sides so I can fit the first half of his oversized arms in place and blend those into the body, connecting to the lats behind and pulling the chest across to create a smooth, natural transition. Then I'll add the big, meaty forearms and begin to carve out the upper limb musculature. While doing this though, I realized that I'm kinda tempting fate without some sort of armature in place, so I've bent some wire to fit perfectly within the arm and I'll make a little recess to fit it down into, then I can press it in place, sealing up the skin over top so I can move on to making the most important part of the entire sculpture, big old monkey nipples. Finally, I'll blast the body with a heavy dosing of isopropyl alcohol to soften the topmost layer of clay so I can smooth out the fingerprints and tooling marks, leaving me with a nice soft surface ready to be zombified. The zombification process is by far the most fun part of this entire system since it's very much a subtractive method of sculpting. Mostly I'm just working my way around the body, removing large swathes of clay until I've got a how's this guy actually held together kind of a look, at which point I'll work my way back through, cleaning up the cuts, texturing the unskinned musculature beneath and cutting lots of rips and tears into the surrounding skin. Then it's back to the open wounds themselves where I'll add a bit of striation to the exposed muscle before working my way around the limbs, thickening up the bones before finally poking all of the leftover bits inside with a series of progressively smaller ball styluses to create a gnarly, rotten flesh-like look. I'll then start to fill in the chest and back cavity with a couple pre-baked clay ribs and some little pre-baked exposed vertebrae down the center of his back, as well as the ends of the arm bones peeking out of his big elbow hole. I'll then work my way around the body again, adding little strands of skin desperately attempting to hold the gaping wounds together. Finally, a bit of goopy insides beginning to fall outside, and I can move up to the head, where I'll thicken up the right side of the face to make a mostly intact ape appearance, before moving over to the other side, where I'll carve away the majority of the clay to leave the skull beneath exposed. Some little strands will keep his jaw attached, and I can fit a gnarly rotten tongue into his mouth, then bake his body for the first time before lifting him up off the base so I can fit some little balls of clay beneath his legs so that I can begin to sculpt his feet. Initially, I built my monkey feet with a set of totally normal, not at all zombified toes poking out of the tips before deciding that that's just not right, at which point I chopped a bunch of set toes off so I could replace them with a set of fleshless, bony digits. Back to the hands then. On the left side, I'll add the bony ends to the exposed forearm, then the mid-palm set of metacarpals, leaving the phalanges for later once I've got something that they can wrap around. The right arm is going to be mostly intact, so I made a pretty bog-standard monkey hand that can fit onto the gnarly nubbin, leaving the detail work till later as I really only wanted the hands in place for now while I get to work making the snake. Much like in nature, my snake starts as an amorphous blob that needs to be rolled into a long danger noodle as it's blown across the rocks. However, failing a windy day, I'll just roll it out by hand. Once I've got an appropriately long noodle with a slightly larger center, I'll crack out my much used scaling roller, which I made years ago, I think in an effort to limit the horror of adding scales one by one. This thing still works a treat and it's as easy as rolling it across the clay, imprinting the scaly texture onto the topmost side of the snake, so I can flip it over and carve the wide bottom scales using the backside of a Stanley blade. Then I can